All right, we're going to continue our journey through the Tao Te Ching here today in verse 2. I'm going to read the verse, and then as I did in the last video, and I'll do in all future videos on this particular playlist, I'll talk about at least what my perception is on how this can be applied to the way that we live here in modern life, especially as people that have been considered high achievers. If you consider yourself a high achiever and you're interested in Taoism, then this playlist is definitely for you. That's what I consider myself to be, a high achiever for a long time until I got to the Tao and realized that achievement can happen. It just needs to happen in a different way. And that's one of the things here in verse 2 that I think really stands out. So I'll read the verse and then we'll talk through how at least I think it can be applied to modern day life. Realize that I don't consider myself a spiritual teacher or enlightened or guru. I'm just a guy who's interested in just living a simpler way while still having a lot of the cool things that we have here in our modern society. So let's read verse 2 here, and that is, when people see some things as beautiful, others become ugly. When people see some things as good, others become bad. Being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy support each other. Long and short define each other. High and low depend on each other. Before and after follow each other. So let's stop right there. There's more in this verse, but this is clearly talking about the need for contrast. The only reason that we can perceive anything as good is because we perceive other things as bad. This is telling us that, hey, everything that happens in the universe, thus everything that happens in our personal worlds or the worlds of the people that are all around us, it's inherently benign. There isn't an event that's inherently good or inherently bad. It's our perception of the event that makes it good or bad. Take any example of anything that has been, that you may have felt was bad in the world. So let's say, for example, 9/11. If 9/11 was inherently good, then everybody would have felt amazing about it. Or if it was inherently bad, everybody would have felt bad about it. But instead, there were groups of people that felt terrible about it, namely Americans. There were groups of people that felt great about it, namely the perpetrators of 9/11, which I realize is still up for debate, especially if you're into conspiracies. In any event, there are people who think it's good and think it's bad. There's no event that is good or bad. It's the perception of those things. But we need to have them both, just like we need to have ugly and beautiful, because it helps us understand where we sit in relation to everything around us. And it helps us understand what's going on in the world around us. And it helps us make some choices and some decisions in what we have. There's that part. So let's go back to the text and we'll go through the last part of it here. So we know what we've gone through before is about the opposites playing off of each other. Therefore, the master acts without doing anything and teaches without saying anything. Things arise and she lets them come. Things disappear and she lets them go. She has but doesn't possess, acts but doesn't expect. When her work is done, she forgets it. That's why it lasts forever. Acting without doing anything. This is one of the most difficult concepts, and I needed a lot of different spiritual teachers to help guide me to understand what this means, because to me, it was like that was impossible. It was impossible that you could act without doing anything, because act is a verb, and verb means we're doing something. So how is it that we can act without doing anything, especially when we're the master, right? And the master is something that, you know, I think that it's possible for people to achieve. They're one with the master, but they're aside from the master. And we'll get into that in later texts and chapters here from the Tao. But acting without doing anything is basically a feeling of effortlessness in inaction. And what I've found this to be is to sit back and wait and ask for directions from the Tao, which for me comes from my solar plexus. When I'm sitting in meditation and I ask for direction from the Tao, then that's where it seems to come out of. But sitting back long enough until you hear the right direction, and then you take an action that seems effortless. That's how I've taken to the acts without doing anything. So, in the context of how we live today, and the hustle and grind culture that we have, especially here in the United States, that tells you that it's not necessarily the way of the Tao. If it feels like there's friction, if it feels like you're fighting way too hard, then chances are you're fighting against the nature of the Tao and you're trying to push through with your own ego. And so you're acting by doing. And if you notice, the more you do, it feels like the less you actually get done. It's because you're acting against the Tao when you do that. The master has but doesn't possess, and acts but doesn't expect. So what this says is Lao Tzu is inviting us to realize that if you do not believe that you are enough without it, you'll never be enough with it. Now, what that means is that the feeling that we have, if it's attached to something outside of ourselves, which ourselves is the Tao, like the Tao is us and apart from us at the exact same time as I understand it. If we try to attach our feeling that we want to have towards anything outside of ourselves, then we're going to have loss and we're going to feel badly about it. Acting but not expecting comes right on the heels of that, which is acting for the pure joy of acting, not because it's going to give you some form of an outcome. And if we can live in that space, then what we've got is we've got the keys, and we can tap into this never-ending stream of contentment. And contentment by itself, that is the most freeing thing. Because when we live in a world where we're trying, there's friction. Because we feel like we should have been further by now, or we should have figured it all out by now. But the reality is contentment comes with acceptance. Acceptance of what? Acceptance of exactly what is right now. That's chapter 2 of the Tao as I see it. I'd love to hear how you see it. And again, if you want to follow along at home and you're not into reading the book yet, you can go to Amazon and you can get the Tao Te Ching. This one here is translated by Stephen Mitchell. It's considered the gold standard of the translation of this text. So I would encourage you to grab one, and thanks for watching this. We'll see you guys for chapter 3.